Welcome everyone, it's Monday again, 7th of, what are we on, September? Yeah, September now. It's FAQ 55, 56 and 57, and it's all about communism today. Aidan, we've got David and Michael. What? Yeah. Nick.
Yeah.
It says Michael if I put my hand over your thing. I'm just like, what? And they're like, oh yeah, of course that is actually your name. Sorry. Okay, so question 55 is this what Karl Marx advocated? So I'll kick off. My kind of answer to this was no. Marx's ideas included many things that aren't seen in a resource-based economy, such as the monetary system and human government.
And I don't know what Karl Marx advocated because I'm not sure. So I put, if you mean communism, then I don't think it has ever been achieved.
Yeah, similar things. I put Marx has been analysed, misquoted, misinterpreted by many people, as all works are by one person. And I think that's the trouble with leaving direction and guidance to one person and letting one person's reading of life guide everybody else. Communism or socialism, as advocated by Marx, isn't the same as the ideology that masquerades as communism or Marxism in communist, in quote, societies, because they all use capital and a monetary system. They're better described as state-sponsored as opposed to corporate-sponsored capitalism, because elites control capital and the mass of people were disempowered by state control of capital.
Cool. Sorry, I was just rereading that a little bit as I was answering someone who I thought was going to join us. It's a nice answer. Let's see what the real one says. So, question 55, is this what Karl Marx advocated? Although Marx was a brilliant man for his time, he did not foresee the methods and advantages of a high-tech, resource-based economy. Communism used money and labor, had social stratification, and elected officials to maintain the communist traditions. Most importantly, communism did not eliminate scarcity, nor did they have a blueprint for the methods for the production of abundance. Machine production rather than labor will dominate the future. Perhaps, though, through no fault of their own, they also had to maintain huge military expenditures to protect themselves from invasion of fantastics and capitalist institutions.
Yeah, I think that's based on the implementation that masqueraded as communism in places like the USSR and China and Cuba. And a lot of communists would say that communism's never been applied in any true form because it relies on a party state, a partisan structure, a top-down structure, and people who've looked at Marx, all works are open to interpretation, especially if they're written by one person. That wasn't what Marx was advocating. That he advocated a flat structure of no overall control, where the workers were free to do what they wanted. They were free from labour. So I think there's been a little bit of, there's conflation as to what communism means, especially from the USA, where communism, perhaps more than anywhere else in the world, has been a taboo subject, and people haven't been allowed to talk about it. They've been hunted down. You had the McCarthy witch trials in the 1950s, where anybody who was suspected of being a communist or not believing in the American way was hunted down and couldn't work in the fields that they were in. But it's a problem with all isms that somebody says that it was Marxism. It's named after one person. This is what Marx said. it's there to develop and build on. So I can see some overlaps between Marxism and communism. But as the answer said, what we have now in the world and what the possibilities we've had now through science and the what little rational thinking that there is in the world has opened up more opportunities that Marx could never have foreseen.
Yeah, very much so. I think, yeah, the technology that's around just kind of it helps to shape the culture, and so it's impossible to say what's going to actually happen in 50 years. And
Plus, there were very radical ideas for the time. Well, radical in that I think he actually brought together a lot of thinking that had come before from lots of other people who preceded him. People like the Chartists and all the other things that happened in the past. And he sort of distilled that. But of course, in that 19th century society, it was still very radical to have it in one place, published in a book, in a sort of logical manner, which people could read and think and discuss, and that's why it all got, stamped on, and people didn't like it because elites didn't like people being actually told, well, there's another way of thinking about this. So I think it's really a development of I think, like I say, it's way if you start getting bogged down into saying, well, Marx said this, therefore it must be right, or so and so said this, so it must be right. You're just going on one person's interpretation of history, but
it's
an evolution of ideas, I would say.
And that's like really where Jacques is as well, and where we really stand with the Venus projects, and he's kind of keep in mind that what he said over the time was said at that time. Things have changed. And books and kind of written down language, especially after the author dies, becomes this kind of immortal thing. Really, it was set in that day, so different things are around. And like what Jacques kind of says is that, like, say Marx didn't have any creative ideas, or like he just brought in things from different environments, and that's what Jacques done. And the technology that's around today enables him to take it in from a much wider area. Obviously the progress that's gone on as well, it kind of just leads to here, where he is.
Yeah, I don't think you can ignore what progress has been made since Marx and Engels wrote, the Communist Party Manifesto and Das Kapital. I wouldn't describe myself as a communist. I don't believe in isms or sticking to. I'm anti-ideology. I see ideology, especially the ideology we have to live under now. It's not an ideology. They call it an ideology. It's really a bastardization of human nature. So the anti to that is what I think now. But without those, you would have had a lot of the social progress you'd had by people coming together and really thinking along the same lines as the Venus Project, in that resources are there for everybody. They shouldn't be there for a minority. They should be equitably distributed, trying to get control of ideas and all the things we need to live in life. It's been a struggle, but it's been some progress made, especially when you see what came before, since people have picked up on those ideas. But there's been a plateau, and there's always been plenty of opportunity for people who are against that kind of breakdown of elite structures to come back and undermine it, because capital has still existed, and it's not got rid of capital. Marx said that capitalism would fall, but it's not fallen yet. So therefore, that's something to achieve in the future. So that's why I wouldn't call myself a Marxist, although I believe in a lot of the things that have been written and said. A lot of things that people say, well, Marx predicted this. The key thing in that getting rid of a monetary system or capital, that hasn't yet happened. So there needs to be some kind of concrete, solid way of making sure that happens at some point in the future.
Yeah,
I think Marx was he had ideas about it, but like I say, he didn't live now, so he can't see what's around now.
Yeah. So the kind of, the actual areas where communism was experimented on, you maybe say that was more like early stages of a transition, just as say a resource-based economy is we're starting to transition to a resource-based economy. It's still going to have some of these problems that we have to actually overcome, and it's not like you can turn off the monetary system, you can turn off government, or that kind of stuff, which is happening around there already. So what we saw was like a transition towards that really the technologies at the time didn't enable that transition, whereas the technologies that we see now would enable a real, I think at least, would enable a transition to a resource-based economy today.
And I think also with it being, with what happened with communism, with it being taken over by a state apparatus, a party structure, a top-down structure, it undermined it in people's minds. So then it gave people some ammunition for people who are opposed to that to come against it and say, well, it doesn't work. It's been tried. It doesn't work, even though it might not be what. Oh, sorry. So even though it might not be actually what people who are communists would say is communism or Marxism. Mm. So I think that's part of the problem that's happened. And of course, it works within a global system that can undermine it. You can have, say, people putting in these things, and then it can be, people can use propaganda and all the power that wealth gives them to say, oh well, look what's happening over here. And they can actually deliberately put things in place which can make it not work, because communism is trying to really ape capitalism. You look at what it was trying to do. It was just trying to do the same thing as capitalism does, but in a slightly, in a slightly different way. Communism as it masqueraded as communism. That's why I call it state-sponsored capitalism, because it wasn't really that much different to corporate capitalism.
Cool. I think the third question could be interesting, because that's the one that I really have after that. But if we go on to the second one now, how does the Venus Project compare with communism? Very similar question. My answer was, whilst there's a few similarities, they're vastly outweighed by the differences. The technology which enables an RBE was simply not around in those times when communism was being formed.
And I wasn't well, I'm not sure on communism and Marxism and stuff, but I'm just guessing that there's many different variations of communism, which is, I think, what you were saying, David, about it not being actual communism and being more state-sponsored capitalism.
Yeah, I mean, it's communism as it's been put in place by the parts of the world that have done it. It's all been pretty much a personality cult as well. Leninism, Marxism. It goes after one person's name. Maoism, all that kind of thing. So one person who's at the top of a party structure says this is the way we do it. That's really the opposite to what the RBE. It still relies on people being kept in a state of ignorance and a state of disempowerment. The whole thing about communism, well, all workers are equal, and all, everybody will sort of be. Well, all it did was it devalued workers. It didn't sort of bring people up to a certain level. It just said, well, you're all basically at the bottom of the pile. You'll all live in the worst housing. You'll all have the least access to resources. So the corruption of capitalism stayed there, and it undermined all the ideology. What did I say? What I said? I said it's a better. I think the Venus Project is a better vision. Like I say, because it's had time to develop on what's come before. Marx didn't live in the age we live in now, where the processes and technologies that could deliver an RBE were developed to such a stage as they are now. But I still think there's a lot of overlap between the two visions, because both advocate a society free of top-down control and free of capital. But one's a development of the other. and not rooted in ideology either. No, it's a more rational way of thinking about things, and puts ideology to one side.
Why where it really failed, I guess, the methods that we saw is that it failed to meet the actual needs of people. It's just kind of something that, as you're saying, that it just didn't meet the needs that the capitalist society could meet. So they were unable to really move away from capitalism.
Well, it wasn't.
It's only when you start getting abundance can you then move away from rationing, rather than still rationing and trying to just get rid of the monetary aspect.
Well, as the state-sponsored capitalist states who masqueraded as communism, they had all the things in it. They were authoritarian. If the rules were made top down to be obeyed by people. If you didn't obey them, you got sent to camps and gulags or executed. It sort of became a method of really advancement for an elite. So it's as it was implemented and as it was interpreted by capitalism. It's basically communism was interpreted by capitalism into a certain way of putting it through, and that was no better than capitalism as dictated by corporations, because it was essentially the same thing but with a different packaging, a different ribbon on it, a red hammer and sickle ribbon or whatever, rather than the stars and stripes or the Union Jack.
Shall I read the answer?
Yeah, please.
FAQ number 56, TVP FAQ 56. How does the Venus Project compare with communism? Communism, being similar to a resource-based economy or the Venus Project, is an erroneous concept. Communism has money, banks, armies, police, prisons, charismatic personalities, social stratification, and is managed by appointed leaders. The Venus Project's aim is to surpass the need for the use of money. Police, prisons, and the military would no longer be necessary when goods, services, healthcare, and education are available to all people. The Venus Project would replace politicians with a cybernetic society in which all of the physical entities are managed and operated by computerized systems. The only region that the computers do not operate or manage is the surveillance of human beings. This would be completely unnecessary and considered socially offensive. A society that uses technology without human concern has no basis of survival. Communism has no blueprint or methodology to carry out their ideals, and along with capitalism, fascism, and socialism, will ultimately go down in history as failed social experiments.
Cool. Yeah, for me that's just really cementing in that it's like communism was the ideology at the time, but they just didn't have the technology at all. Whereas a resource-based economy is based on the technology, setting an ideology around that technology and the environment. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? So instead of just asking people to change, you actually create the environment where that change is possible.
And the governing process is more like the machines take care of the needs, so we have a lot less to argue about, I suppose, because everybody's getting fed.
And that's like the project says that they don't expect anyone to move into the cities until you can build a better better standard of living in that city. They don't look at these kind of transitional low budget off grid kind of communities as a way forwards, because it doesn't provide, well, to the culture, to the values of people today, it can't provide the same level of meeting their needs, I guess, without quite a large cultural value change, which is very hard for lots of people. So if you want to start moving in hundreds of millions and billions of people into these cities and actually changing the environment, you have to build them so that they provide more than regular cities.
I think it failed. I think what we think of as communism, it fails what we call the democracy test, that the competent democracy test, because it still relies on people being kept in a state of ignorance, skills being seen as a privilege that can be used by certain people for certain aims. In other words, to control a population, with the entitlements that brings.
Yeah, absolutely. All the governments end up being just about maintaining a differential advantage with the populations and whatever. Next question. So I think you kind of answered already, David, what I was kind of having about this, which is we've talked almost exclusively about the technologies that enable us to manage our systems in a different way. But in kind of the underlying ideas and ideology, is there a difference? So how does this system differ from Marxism besides the technological use? I said there's no need for human government, but again, I realized I'm focusing in actually that's a technologically enabled kind of change, so that's not true either.
Yeah, and I'm still like, I'm not up on Marxism and communism, so just like which of these actual ideas have actually been achieved or tested, and like David said, they haven't, because it's still capitalism in a way.
Yeah, one of the main differences I can see is that, and I think this is all open to interpretation, is whether Marx actually advocated an alternative to the monetary system, because he advocated labour vouchers. So he still advocated the use of labour, but labour would be on an equal stratification with capital, and labour vouchers wouldn't be circulated as they are with cash. Now, whether that means it's a monetary system advocated or not, or whether that would be part of his Marx's transition phase from capitalism to communism, I'm not sure, and I think that's open for debate. And I think also, Marxism different from the TVP in that it was really competing with capitalism. So capitalism was there in the background, and communism and Marxism was always trying to copy what capitalism were doing. So instead of trying to actually challenge it, there was always a race. So you had to end it with an arms race, a technology race, copying all the technology and thinking that capitalism had come up with. And I think that's different to what the TVP is doing. Personally, I think if Marx had been alive today and had seen the TVP, he would have been quite amazed and pleased. And it's possible that he could have, been very excited by the proposals for a resource-based economy.
It's possible, I guess. So that's cool. That's quite good, even though it's debatable. And even if you say, okay, they didn't want a monetary system, which we've kind of said before, that the real ones actually, but not the real ones, the one that was seen actually ended up with, labour was used as a resource rationing tool, basically. Cool. Thanks. So, should I read the real question? Answer?
Yeah, go on.
Right. FAQ 57. How does this system differ from Marxism besides the technological use? Communism is a political system managed by a form of ideology which does not necessarily relate to human or environmental needs. Communism uses money, banks, armies, police, prisons, charismatic personalities, social stratification, and is managed by appointed leaders and uses indoctrination. The Venus Project's aim is to surpass the need for the use of money. Police, prisons, banking, advertising, stockbrokers, military and governments would no longer be necessary when goods, services, healthcare and education are all available to all people. The Venus Project would replace politicians with a cybernated society in which all of the physical entities would as quickly as possible be managed and operated by computerized systems. The only region that the computers would not operate or manage is the surveillance of human beings. Well, this would be completely unnecessary and considered socially offensive. The society that uses technology without human concern has no basis for survival. Communism has no blueprint or methodology to carry out their ideals, along with capitalism, fascism, and socialism, will ultimately go down in history as failed social experiments. One of communism's concerns is the condition of labour and the working class. The Venus Project's major concerns are producing products with limited labour and eventually eliminating labour, and at the same time giving people all the amenities of a prosperous high-energy society. It is not our aim to produce a society that does nothing but enjoy leisure time. Instead, people will be introduced to limitless opportunities to explore, create, participate, and learn.
That was like the last answer, but with little extra bits.
Yeah.
I was thinking, shit, I answered the wrong question.
A lot of this stuff is taken, I think, from either Future by Design or the Venus or The Best Money Can't Buy, and kind of just edited bits that answer the question. So yeah, sometimes they repeat themselves. It's quite good though. How about, if you guys are alright for maybe 5-10 minutes, got another question that this kind of raises.
You can go for it.
It's one that I'm sure we've had many times, Mick. But it says the only region that the computers do not operate or manage is the surveillance of human beings. Now that to me sounds like it's directed towards someone who's had bad past and bad associations or negative associations with surveillance. So basically, they're trying to distance themselves with the kind of fascism. But I'm not necessarily sure that's true in terms of surveilling human beings. I remember Jacques talking about basically if everyone had a little chip in them, it told you where everyone was at some point. Maybe there's no one there actually looking, but it all gets kind of recorded. And then someone accuses you of murdering their wife or something. You can just go, hey, no, I wasn't. Like, I think today's surveillance is around privacy. Sorry, I know this is supposed to be a question. Okay, so in terms of surveillance of human beings, as a question, do you think the concept of privacy will be around in a resource-based economy?
I'd say that's one of the things that will be hard through transition. That people will be afraid of it, and things like you said that could prove that you weren't killing somebody might not originally during transition, and maybe even for a few generations after, be seen as good things. Especially like people think it's 1984 sort of shit. But I think when the rest of the information is transparent in like the competent democracy people are showing their workings and how they're working things out and why these amount of resources need to be given to energy production or space exploration, ocean exploration, etc. Then once people can see that we're just the transparency of information is useful, then maybe the values will change so that people say, well, I don't mind you seeing what emotional state I was in at the time somebody died, or like where I was at the time that somebody died, to help prove that they didn't kill them.
David, any thoughts?
Yeah, because obviously this has been a big issue, especially over the last few years with the revelations that we've had about what's been happening with the use of technology by the NSA, GCHQ, other global intelligence communities. And I think the problem there is, that surveillance has not been done on the basis of the competent democracy that we keep talking about. People were never told about it, apart from when it was revealed, and it's too late because it's all happened. B, it's because of a lot of this, the paranoia and competition for resources you have under a capitalist monetary-based system create all sorts of opportunities for that kind of invasive intrusion to people's lives to be subverted for the use of the monetary system and for capital. So therefore, you have people starting wars over resources, over oil and things like that, which then feeds into things like terrorism. So it creates the whole bogeyman, which is then meant to be monitoring. So everybody then becomes criminalized. Everyone is treated as a terrorist. So you put in terrorist laws and surveillance laws under the radar, which nobody knows about, which then, of course, breed more resentment amongst the people being monitored. It's a distraction. All, like I said before, all that technology that's being used to monitor people. So every single email, every single Facebook chat goes under metadata to be stored in a massive computer, either to be sifted through for certain keywords which might mark you down as a subversive, or it's used at some future point to see what the trend is in society, or it's used, as we know, for actually feeding the system, so that to monitor people's movements around the world as resource, as labor, rather than as human beings. So it's all subverted. It's a science that's been subverted once again. That science, the huge terabytes, whatever they use in these computers under mountains in Utah, could be used for shifting resources around to where it's needed equitably. But again, it's been used to make sure that the opposite happens. So it's all driven by paranoia. Whereas if it was driven for those reasons, right? So want to know where. So you've got, like you said, the chip that you talked about, which then can monitor your health, which can monitor your nutritional needs, and it's all done democratically. People are told about what it is, what it's going to be used for, how it's used,
and given a choice, like
and given a choice.
And then
yeah, that's a good idea. That's a good use of technology. It means we're not going to go hungry. It's not going to be say, well, if you disagree with the system, we are going to hunt you down, or we're going to monitor everything and use it against you, or for the reasons it's used now.
So you can see, like, your friend's got one in, and he's getting fed there, and he's got access to extra things through this chip, and nothing bad's happened to him for a good 6 months to a year. Then you can go, oh yeah, I was a bit afraid at first, but yeah, bang it.
Yeah, on the Gaussian.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. And you wouldn't be, flipping heck, we got this email and you said that, you criticised so and so, so therefore we're going to mark you down put you on a watch list, and make sure that you can't go anywhere. You restricted movements every time you go and fly. Somewhere you'd be dragged over to one side by security, strip searched, and have your laptop taken away. Hopefully that kind of thing wouldn't happen under that.
Yeah, I'm gonna come in a little bit because I'm very. I don't care about privacy. I really don't. There's some embarrassing stuff that I might not want people to look, but if you're really interested, yes, you can look at my porn history. Like, I think, especially kind of younger people these days, that you just accept that you're connected to the web, and being connected to the web means that there is less privacy. It's the whole concept. The whole concept of it. It's people, blogging, twittering, Facebooking. It's all open to the public, and people are much more accepting of that these days. Obviously, memories from the past are a little bit different for people kind of my age, because there's not a lot really happened. Apart from like a couple of Gulf Wars since I've been around. There's not been a huge amount of anti-privacy kind of stuff. There's stuff where they've recorded, say, my messages and stuff. I don't really care. There's a few little transgressions on there. I've broken some petty little laws that maybe if they want to look up for it, they can. But generally, I don't really care at all. The actual advantages of the technologies that we use and of being connected and being recorded, to me at least, are kind of pretty cool. If we have the ability to the big kind of challenge is who owns the information, and and what gets done with it. Can you opt out of it later on? That kind of thing. It's obviously big. There's obviously lots of big problems today. But say stuff like suggested posts, suggested adverts. I quite like them. I think, because I grew up watching, like South Park at 10:30 at night, and a tampon advert comes on. Yeah. And I'm just like, what? It just doesn't make any sense, even when it's targeted.
Make eaten.
Things like
a sandwich.
Yeah, things like Stumble Upon, things like Netflix that take an amalgamation of your behavior and go, hey, maybe you'd like this. That's awesome. That's a total invasion of privacy, but awesome. And I'm completely fine with that. So that's maybe an overly positive kind of look at it. One thing that I'll say is I remember the question, and I remember Jack talking about the chip in his hand. What he said afterwards was that basically he'd not be okay with submitting to any sort of surveillance of that kind until there was a system in place which proved there was absolutely no position of advantage or differential advantage that anyone could gain. Once you're in that kind of stage, which is total RBE, we're not transition anymore. We're there and evolving still onwards. But once you get to that point, then he's like, yeah, maybe we can do something like this. But he actually, this is from the 70s, so maybe he's kind of toned down a bit, but he was very kind of fearful of this kind of in this system, especially in the capitalistic society. So fair enough.
I think that's it. It's not the technology, but it's how it's used. You at the moment you've got big companies putting in the technology to be used for surveillance, who make a lot of money out of it. You've touched on the marketing things, and that's sort of a field I've worked in, online marketing, where you're using algorithms to target people because of their online usage. But again, the whole product, the whole development of that product, who can afford that product, that kind of thing, it's all dictated by capitalism. So if, like the films on Netflix, it's all dictated by capitalism. Who can be bothered to commission the film? Who can be bothered to, put in the product placement in the series on films? Volkswagen give the cars, and Coca-Cola give the drinks that the actors use, all that kind of thing. So it's still driven by capitalism. It's still very resource competitive.
Can I just pull you up there? Do you think
Yeah.
there'd be films in an RBE?
Oh yeah,
How
but
do
I
you,
wouldn't imagine that. It's a hope. Well, see, from my perspective, at the moment, the film industry is very protective of. You've got about 5 major media companies that dominate the global market. So they will decide what gets made, what gets shown, what topics get discussed, what the scripts say. It's like a self-censorship by the market. The advertising comes in. Uh, you get the actors being paid £20 million a film, the producers being paid £30 million a film, the people who work in the cinemas that you go to so you can watch the flipping film get paid minimum wage or on the workfare. It sort of works like that. So yeah, hopefully films will be made, and there will be more opportunity. So if somebody wrote a script, the technology and the resource will be there for that to be realised on screen and everyone to see it. It won't be saying, oh, who's going to make money out of this? Who's going to want to see it? The sponsor doesn't like the message in this film, doesn't like the script in this film. It's by a new writer and it's completely untried. It's too much of a risk. That would hopefully be out of the question. And creativity will probably take off. You wouldn't get this sort of dictatorship of money deciding what is art and what isn't art and what can be seen and what can't be seen.
exactly. What you've described as YouTube versus Hollywood.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a good thing. I mean, the technology is here, and if you just took the technology that's coming through in a more democratic way, and took, if you've got like stuff on YouTube, but then you could go into a big 3D or 4D cinema and see that with your friends, in with a quality environment that Hollywood is allowed to produce a lot of the shit that they can release in. You get in it's like that it's a subversion of the technology and the science by capital. Every time people say to me, "Oh, capitalism's achieved this, capitalism's achieved that," I say, "No, it isn't. It's science. It's people coming together in cooperation. What the capitalism does is then subvert it and turns it to crap, essentially, and then people turn against it. So they turn against the surveillance technology, they turn against the technology that can monitor it because they don't like what's being done with it, or they didn't know it was being done, or then they get lied to about what it's being used for.
Yeah.
And it just
like a
moving around like headless chickens, it's not good.
To use a bullshit word, but in a sentence, technology is morally neutral. It's what we do with it.
It's just out there. It's just the laws of the universe are out there, waiting to be discovered. But it depends on how we as human beings use them.
Cool. So yes, no, surveillance, privacy in an RBE for the RBE.
I would say I think people would want. I think the surveillance would be much more democratic and much more optional. People say yes, we want surveillance for these reasons, but we don't want a camera shoved in our faces when we're having relationships with our partners, or we don't want them to know exactly what we're having for food or what rows we had with because the RB isn't a perfect society. People will still row, they'll still have arguments, they'll still fall out with each other, they'll get jealous of each other for different reasons. I would imagine it's that human nature coming through. But it won't be used. Have a difference of opinion with somebody about something, but it won't be used to hold against people. To sort of create an elite or a structure that dominates.
I think instead of like surveillance in an RBE being used like it is in capitalism to point out people's mistakes and saying, oh, look what this guy did, he did wrong, you know what I mean? Like in an RBE it'd be like to help you maybe overcome your mistakes, or like throw some information up in front of you that stops the row. Or I don't know, something that says, right, you guys need to sleep, or something like that.
I kind of dreaming a little bit here, but I see there could be like it might fall into the social realm, or kind of what you'd say is like politeness. Of it's generally not polite to spy on someone whilst they're peeing, or it's generally not polite to do this or that. You can if you really want, but like it'd probably be to come down to kind of manners or something of it's generally not acceptable to do this. Would you like someone to do it to you, kind of thing?
I think notions of privacy have changed throughout the ages. One time life was lived much more on the street. That was the Facebook of the 19th century. Social media was people being sociable, talking to each other, and talking about the news. Social media's just replaced that in some ways. That we don't have that lifestyle, so we get together online to talk about things rather than in the streets. We don't all work down the same factory at the end of the road or things like that. But I think, what defines privacy has always been also a matter of privilege as well. In the past, the more money you have, the more privileged you could be because you lived in more isolation. It, it's like at the moment you've got the thing about the press and the intrusion, especially with the things that happened with the Sun and the tabloids a few years ago, and the investigations that happened there. But still, all the privacy laws are geared up towards people with money. We can still be bad-mouthed and slagged off in the mainstream media. People without money and lies told about them. You can't do much about it. So privacy has always been the preserve of the rich. So I suppose in a resource-based economy, when we wouldn't have that say-so of who's got a certain number of digits to hand in a bank account, what counts as privacy would be a democratic decision.
Cool. Good answer, guys.
Probably waffled on too much as we usually do, but
yeah, it was very good. Very good chat. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to talk about. I'm pretty tired, so I might just shoot off.
No, I'm good.
Yeah. Just one thing, but you don't have to record this bit, but